What's up in War Eagle, everybody? It's your guy Ike Jones, and we are back with a little Lobtown action today, previewing the 2024-25 season for the Auburn Tigers. Just a little roster preview for all the things that's going on. Y'all know how we do, man. Let's get into it. Let's hop into the town.
The Auburn Express. You are now listening to the War Report Longtown Podcast with your boy Ike Jones.
All right, y'all. 2024 season coming up. 2023, of course, didn't go the way that we Auburn fans would prefer that it have gone. But, hey, listen, it is what it is. Let's get in here and talk about what has changed since then. If everybody is completely unaware, there is a revamp of this roster that's happening right now. Trey Donaldson gone, KD Johnson gone, Aiden Holloway gone. So the entire backcourt pretty much is having to get redone. And Coach Bruce Pearl and his staff have done a marvelous job, in my opinion, with putting a new crop of basketball players together that are going to go out here and figure out how to win some games for Auburn this season. So let's take a look at what the roster looks like for this coming season. Lot of upperclassmen, lot of seniors on this squad, but of course, Tahad Pettiford coming in. He is the highly touted true freshman guard that's here, 5'10", 175 pounds. He is a dynamic finisher at the rim. He's just a scorer, right? So when you think about replacing guys like KD Johnson, Tahad Pettiford comes to mind immediately as a guy who can come in and give you that energy and the speed and the ability to just go in there and put up points off of the bench. You're going to get that from Tahad Pettiford. Coming in for a transfer, of course, JP Pegues. This guy is a senior guard. He's been through a lot of situations out there when he was at Furman University, coming in 6'2", 165. And he's a guy I think that is going to be able to fill the role that Trey Donaldson was in. And we'll look at the guards more specifically in here just a minute. But JP Pegues is absolutely a guy who is going to be able to play significant minutes for this Auburn squad. I look at him as possibly being the starting point guard for this team going into next season. Denver Jones, coming into his second season at Auburn as a transfer player, 6'4", 205. He really was just rounding into form as the season got along. I felt like the staff was really trying to figure out how to utilize him properly, and they got towards that path towards the latter portion of the season. But he's coming in 6'4", 205. The freshman Ja'Kai Howard, 6'6", 185, dynamic high flyer, good energy guy that's going to be coming in off of the bench for Auburn next season. Expect him to be a highlight machine when he gets his opportunities. The guy from the last two seasons, senior Janai Broome, 6'10", 240. He is going to be a guy that's going to be on all the lists going into the season. Watch lists are going to have Janai Broome's name all over it. Look for him to be the leader of this team once again going into next season. Senior forward Chris Moore, 6'6", 220. He is a guy that has been a solid contributor for the team. Really, we documented this on this program, had his struggles at times offensively, but once he came back off the bench, he found his way back into form of being a contributor offensively, always was there on the defense, always was there from a leadership vocal standpoint. And they're going to need that again this year from Chris Moore. Looking forward to seeing how he rounds into form for his senior season. Jaheim Hudson, senior, he is a transfer in from SMU, played at Georgia State as well. 6'7", 220. He's a guy who has some versatility to him. He can step out and shoot a little bit. He's a guy who can play in the post, has good hands around the rim, decent shot blocker. But Jaheim Hudson is a guy that I'm looking forward to being a solid contributor for this team as well. Chad Baker-Mazara, in my opinion, is he and Denver Jones, along with Janai Broome, are going to be the big three for this team coming up into this season. Senior forward, 6'7", 180. He is a menace on both ends of the floor. Good kind of point forward facilitator, scorer, rebounder. He does all things necessary defensively in the passing lane. He's going to be a guy that's going to factor in heavily for this team. Miles Kelly, a guy I'm really excited about, senior guard coming over from Georgia Tech, 6'7", 180 there for Miles Kelly. He is another guy that's going to come in and give you some scoring. He's good defensively, good, not great, good defensively, but he's going to be a solid piece for Auburn. And when I start talking about some of the stuff that I really like to see from this team, you'll see why I'm really high on this team if you can't tell already. Chaney Johnson, the senior forward, going into his second season at Auburn, 6'7", 220. Listen, athleticism out of the gym for Chaney Johnson. Looking forward to see him continue to round in the form. He has, the three-level scoring ability, needs to work on the handle a little bit more. Hopefully that's a big focus for him this offseason, being able to put the ball on the floor and really attack off of the bounce from the perimeter. And in the full court transition game, really being able to be a better decision maker in some of those instances. But love what I'm seeing from Chaney Johnson as the progression continues to happen for him. Dylan Cardwell, the graduate senior, coming in and really being the kind of, in my opinion, he's the guy, he's the glue guy for this team. He's the one that kind of makes this all, because he's the best, in my opinion, shot blocker. He's the guy that alters the shots around the rim. He's the energy guy. He's going to come in and he's going to bring you that toughness and that grittiness that you need to be able to compete in this conference. Dylan Cardwell is going to be major factor for the team coming into this season, his final season on the Plains. AD, Darren Scott, not sure how much he's going to play, but I think he's going to get more minutes this senior season. The 6'9", JUCO transfer, 207 pounds, able to bring you some additional toughness on the inside and play there as needed. And then you got the walk-on guys here with CJ Williams, the coach's son there, Presley Patterson, Blake Musilek, Reed Trapp, and then Haston Alexander. As Coach Pearl is fond of saying, these are the guys that are working your scout team, and they make your team have to work hard during practice, and they're going to be super important to the preparation of this team and being able to understand how to attack the teams that they're going up against. These guys are your scout team. They're the ones that are helping you to get prepared going into each of the weeks as the season progresses. So important pieces to this team, and AD is going to be playing with that team a little bit. You'll probably have the freshmen out there with Tahad and Jakai Howard coming in and playing on that team a little bit as well to get these guys prepared. But let's just kind of talk a little bit about the things that I'm excited about for this team. I already spoke of the guys that are no longer on the team, but just kind of let's take a look at what I'm calling the changing of the guards here. And you can see statistically kind of what that looks like for Auburn this season. You've got Trey Donaldson, Aiden Holloway, and KD Johnson going out of the door, taking their respective 6.7, 7.3, and 7.1 points per game with them. That doesn't look like any, significant loss when you look at it. But, especially when you look at the guys that are coming in with JP Pegues, a guy who was averaging 18, and Miles Kelly, a guy who was averaging almost 14 points a game, the leading scorer for their respective teams last season. Miles Kelly was, at least for Georgia Tech, and JP, if not number one, number two on that team. But, guys that are used, but they're used to playing more minutes, so their minutes are going to get decreased coming into this season for sure. And it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to contribute and what ways they're going to be asked to contribute, because they're going to be asked to do some things they're not used to doing, right? So JP Pegues, again, he's not going to have the ball in his hands for 70% of the game like he would have been if he were still at his previous school. And he at Furman, he's not going to be asked to do that. He's also not going to be, put in the position where he's going to be kind of really on an island out there as far as what he's going to be having to produce from any statistical standpoint. He's going to have some guys that he can rely on a little bit more and trust to put the ball in their hands. And how does he adapt to being able to do that? Because some guys need the ball in their hands to be effective, and other ones you can take the ball out of their hands and they're okay with it. How is Pegues going to do in reduced minutes? Is he going to be able to still be maximum effective during those times? Is that going to allow him to play, a more rigorous brand of basketball than what he's accustomed to for 20 minutes, as opposed to having to conserve his energy for spots and play 30, 32 minutes? We'll see. When you talk about the ability to score, these guys can do it, right? They've scored at a high level in college basketball already. I think that they can come in and do that again. But again, in the case of Miles Kelly, he's not going to get 20 shots in a game, right? He's going to get 10 to 11 shots probably. How effective can he be, right? He is a 30, and shooting 36.9%. That's not a great field goal percentage there for him. So how effective is he going to be in reduced minutes and being able to really come in and contribute as a scorer? He is a guy who you can just put the ball in his hands and say, go get a bucket. So very excited about that because, honestly, when you went to the bench, Trey Donaldson wasn't really a bucket getter. And this, again, the things I said I was going to be excited about. When you get to that second level, that's a big reason why Chad Baker Mazara was coming off of the bench early in the season. They needed a person they can go to the bench and say, "Hey, go get us a bucket." KD is that guy, but he's not really a facilitator from that standpoint. So he was a little bit more predictable, and KD came a long way in being able to share the basketball this last season. But he's just not a certified go get a bucket guy. And you're talking about the difference in a guy in KD who is barely touching 6 feet, and a Miles Kelly who is 6'7", right? So he can play more of that Chad Baker Mazar role, come off the bench and be a secondary scorer or a primary scorer in the second unit. So you have a little bit more of what Bruce Pearl wanted to do last season, which is parity, right? You can basically have your first five and your second five attack the teams in the exact same way, and they're going to have very similar makeups. If you're going to have Chad Baker Mazar as your starting three, and then you come off the bench with Miles Kelly as your backup three, they're close to the same build, and they have very similar skill sets. So they're going to come in and they're going to provide for you a lot of the same stuff, but as a second unit guy who could really be a starter on most teams. So you really have two starting units. Same thing as if you have JP Pegues out there at your point guard. When you go to the bench or when you go to that second unit and you move Denver Jones now into your point situation, you're coming with a guy who has a very similar build. Now, Denver Jones is a very different kind of scorer. He is really more of a shooter in that position. But listen, JP Pegues, you saw on the graphic, 42% from the field, 36% from three. He can fill it up from the 3 points line as well. So he's a guy who can go out there and score. And so whatever unit you have, you've got a guy at the point that can get you buckets. You've got a guy at your two that can go and get you buckets. Now you can slide Miles Kelly into that 2 point. You can slide Miles Kelly into that two and have a Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Chad Baker Mazara, or you could even play big at the three and you can go and put Chaney Johnson at your three. Like, there are so many matchups and lineups that you can bring in with these units that will allow you to really be a lot bigger than you were last season, right? None of these guards, other than Tahad Pettiford, none of these guards are short, right? You've got a bunch of tall 6'4" and up guards on this team this season that really know how to go and get their own shot, can play off of the ball. Miles Kelly did a good job of playing off of the ball at Georgia Tech. He wasn't the primary ball handler last season for Georgia Tech. He could play that role. He actually slid over and played the point guard a little bit last year. So you really now have Pegues, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, and Tahad Pettiford, all guys who could really play the point guard for you. Tahad, not as much, but could do it for you. Play the point guard at any given time and be the primary ball handler for the team. Not to mention, you've got a lot of versatility at your three with Ja'Kai Howard, the freshman, coming in. Already mentioned Miles Kelly. You could play big at the three with Chaney Johnson. You have Chad Baker Mazar there that could play the three. So you've got a lot of versatility that you could put in at that three lineup. And now at the four, if you wanted to play big, again, you could have Janai Broome at the four. You still have Chaney Johnson you could play at the four. You could go into a more up-tempo lineup, have Chad Baker Mazara at your four, right? And you could play, a guy like AD at the four. You've got the ability to come in with Jaheim Hudson at the four right now. You could play Dylan at the five, and you could play Broome at the five. There's a lot of different matchups, and it's going to be interesting to see how Coach Pearl and staff figure out what the distribution of minutes is going to be and how to get all of these guys acclimated into the game, guys that are used to, in Miles Kelly and JP Pegues, playing more minutes, and guys that really aren't used to playing heavy minutes, and a guy like Jaheim Hudson, but can come in and play some more minutes for you and be a solid contributor and give you a lot of the same things that really, honestly, Janai Broome gives you: the ability to step out and shoot the three, the ability to play with back to the basket in the post, the ability to go out there and get boards. There's a lot of symmetry that happens with this team this season with the way that it's constructed. And you have a lot of senior leadership that's on this team. Very excited to see where this Auburn team is going to be able to finish. Having said that, it's an absolute, in my opinion, disappointment looking at this team and its composition comprised of a lot of senior players if this team does not make a deep tournament run this year. You have to at least make the Sweet 16 this season with this. Like, this is not the season where if Chad Baker Mazara is kicked out of a game early, that you don't have the ability to still have a guy that gives you that, right? I just said Miles Kelly can give you a lot of the same stuff that Chad gave you. You've got to make a deep run with this team this year. And I think it's kind of sweet 16 or bust. I don't know what the regular season is going to look like and how well they're going to get up to speed quickly. There's some early tests in this season, and we'll look at the schedule in another episode. But this is a team that is poised and built to be able to make a long run, and they should do that this season. Here's the one thing I'm worried about with this team. And let's go back to this graphic and take a look at this. The biggest thing I'm concerned with this team is going to be how they take care of the basketball. That assist to turnover ratio column right there is the one that's the biggest concern for me. Trey Donaldson and Aiden Holloway, for whatever they didn't give you in scoring, they didn't turn the ball over a lot consistently. Right now, this team averaged around 10.7 turnovers per game last season, and they were up into like the 13 turnovers per game when you got towards the end of the season. Got a little sloppier as the games became a little bit tighter. And in the games that they did not win, turnovers were a huge issue. But this is, when you're talking about JP Pegues, he's averaging 2 turnovers per game. Miles Kelly averaging 2 turnovers per game. That's more than either of the guards that you had last season. Average, whether it was KD Johnson, Aiden Holloway, Trey Donaldson, none of those guys were 2 turnovers or more guys per game. So that's really the only place where I look at it and I say, is this team going to be able to take care of the basketball, and will they be able to come together and coalesce in a way where they're not being sloppy with the basketball too much? You may see a little of that early in the season as they start to figure each other out, but hopefully they get past that as senior players, as we've already talked about, and be able to get in there and figure each other out a little bit quicker. And so that you get into your ability to go in really playing some good basketball as you get into that middle stretch of the season after you get past your early season tournaments and you get into that non-con play and, the ACC versus SEC tournament where you're going to go play Duke, right? Hopefully you figured it out by then. And then once you get into your SEC play, you're going to have really what your identity as a team is going to be at that point in time. I still think it's going to be a really good defensive team. Bruce Pearl teams always are, but I do think that this team has the ability to score a little bit more. It's the turnovers that I'm going to be watching right now. But that's it. I want to hear your thoughts on this upcoming season for Auburn men's basketball and what you think about the composition of this team. We'll be back with some more film breakdown for some of the new guys on the team, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, all those things. Y'all know what y'all need to be doing. Out here, War Report doing that thing, Live Town. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle. I'm out of here, baby.